Okay, we're continuing now in the book of Leviticus, and we spoke about in the last video the concept of holiness and its centrality through all these Parshas from Parshas 4 down to 10. So now let's break down the Parshas specifically. Parshas 4 and 5 deal with holiness of the body. We spoke about last time that our body can actually reflect our spiritual condition. And in these two parshas, the focus is on tsaras. Tsaras is an affliction. It can come on our homes, on our clothes, but the main area is on our skin. It's a type of white skin discoloration that can come on, and the cause for this is a spiritual issue, which is primarily what's known as lashon hara, which is known as evil speech. Evil speech is speaking negatively about someone, even if it's true. A lot of people don't realize, but in Jewish law, it's a commandment in the Torah that one is not allowed to be negative, to share negative impressions of another person, even if it's true. Meaning there's no point other than to be constructive. That is, if someone's going to go into a business venture with someone who's dishonest, or someone is going to marry someone that end up being a not trustworthy spouse or problematic, then of course you're allowed to be constructive there, even if it means sharing negative impressions or truths about a person. But if you're just being negative for the enjoyment of affecting the way another person looks at a third person, that is completely outlawed in Jewish law. And as a result, the Torah tells us that miraculously, or there'd be the spiritual affliction that would come on our bodies, and the person who got this type of tsaras would actually show it to the priest, and if in fact it was that tsaras, they would be actually removed from the community. They'd have to live outside the camp until they were cured from that. Now, a lot of people associate tsaras with being leprosy. It's not leprosy, although it was a skin affliction, and there was this idea of being somewhat of a social leper in so much you're removed from the community because you're not seen as a constructive member if you're negative, which is quite remarkable. In Parsha 5, we learn about the purification from tsaras, how one goes through the stages of getting rid of it and making sure that they're no longer afflicted with it. So that's types of tsaras and purification, Parshas 4 and 5, and other things that talk about how our body reflects our spiritual stature. Parshas 6 and 7 deal with the holiness of the nation. Now, I spoke about in the last video that we as a people have the mandate to be holy. In Parsha 6, we have the Yom Kippur service, and every year we have the opportunity to wipe out all the spiritual impact and impurities that have come into being through our transgressions, so that collectively as a nation we can start the new year with purity and with a renewed sense of commitment to our spiritual and national mandate. In Parsha 7, we actually get the mandate to be holy, and many commandments that express our holiness, whether it's within our family relationships, within the way we deal with others in the marketplace, how we deal with and treat the environment, and so on. But we actually get the mandate, and the mandate, the source of it is, just as God is holy, we are meant to be holy. Which means just as God is completely separate from this universe, he's infinite, which by definition means he's not finite. There's nothing of finite dimensions or reality that's in any way expresses him. Well, how are we meant to be holy, being that we are finite and live within a finite reality, is that we're not to give ourselves over to that reality of that's all that exists. But rather, as we said in the last video, the goal is to separate ourselves from just material passions and lusts, and to realize it's the relationship to the potential within a moment, and to bring out the sanctity of what can be achieved in our relationships with others and with time and in certain places. And that's what's mandated here in Parsha number 7. Parsha number 8 is holiness of the priests and the holidays. Just like the holidays are days that have more sanctity, and therefore we're prohibited on what we can do on a Jewish holiday so we can focus on the spiritual light of the day, so too priests have more sanctity than the rest of the Jewish people, and therefore there's certain things they can't do or people they can't marry to maintain their sanctity. One thing that's brought out in this parsha is that, for example, priests, a Jewish Kohen, is not allowed to go to a cemetery because the cemetery represents death and the loss of life, and the goal of a priest is to connect an individual to the potential of life. And therefore it's just interesting to note that in Judaism, a priest can't officiate at a funeral. In, let's say, Christianity, where do you find a lot of churches? You find them right next to cemeteries. But in Judaism, we have to stay away, or the priest at least has to stay away, because he's meant to bring out the potential of life within life. And the Parshas 9 and 10 is holiness of the land. Now, the land of Israel has its own sanctity, and we have to preserve that independent of our own Sabbath day that we have every week. So once every 7 years, in Parsha number 9, we learn that we have a sabbatical year, that the entire land has to be rested. We can't do any agricultural work on that year. And every 50 years, we have the Jubilee year, which will be another year of rest for the land. And the nation will be involved in more spiritual pursuits, such as learning. But remarkably, the entire nation is commanded to not to work the land. And the Torah deals with the issue when we think, well, what are we going to eat during a year where no one is farming the land? The Torah tells us, God assures us that we will be secure, that there will be a bounty, and we'll be able to sustain ourselves fine through that year. Parsha 10, we learn about the blessings and the curses, that if we maintain the sanctity of the land of Israel, and if we commit to our end of the bargain of keeping the commandments and the study of the Torah and pursuing its understanding, then there'll be tremendous peace and prosperity, we'll be secure in the land. But if not, there'll be unfortunately terrible curses, everything ranging from mental anxiety and depression to famine in the land, to nations coming to attack us in war, to losing those wars and being subjects of those nations, and unfortunately all the way to eventual exile. And this is the first time exile is introduced to the Jewish people as a whole. I just want to remind you that we mentioned in an earlier video that Parshas 9 and 10 historically were said back in the book of Exodus when the Jews were getting the Torah. This is when the blessings and curses and the whole concept of the sabbatical and jubilee years were mentioned. But now you can see chronologically why it fits into the book of Leviticus, because this book is really setting out the mandate and concept of the Jewish people as a whole, in terms of body, national being, our priests and our holidays, and the institution of the land of Israel. I also want to mention that almost no time passes in this entire book of Leviticus. In fact, only 8 days pass. Most of this book was given to Moses on one single day. Okay, well, we've concluded now the third book of the Torah. We always finish in the Torah reading on Shabbat services with Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, which means you should be strong, and may we be strengthened. It's another book of the Torah that gives us insight in how we can be, what we're meant to achieve, and how we're supposed to get there. Okay, so let's close with a little review. Let's take everything away, and here we go. Okay, so we said from this point on, we're focusing on holiness. 4 and 5 is holiness of the body, specifically types of tsaras, that skin affliction, which comes because of lashon hara, which is evil speech, and the purification from tsaras. Parshas 6 and 7 is holiness of the nation. 6 is the Yom Kippur service. 8 is the mandate to be holy and the commandments to be holy. Parsha 8 is the holiness of the priests and the holidays. And 9, 10 is holiness of the land. Parsha number 9, sabbatical and jubilee years. And Parsha 10, the blessings and the curses.